Thank you, Chandran, for inviting me to talk about China, one of my favorite topics. First, I want to sort of give context as to who I am, because a lot of times I talk and then people are like, oh, wow, you're just a China apologist, or you must be paid by the government to talk about propaganda. But actually, I was born in Michigan and I spent most of my early life in the US. I only moved to China in 2004, where I live in Shanghai now. And Pascal talked about innovation hubris. I was part of that Silicon Valley initial entrepreneurship, internet rush. So when I talk about China, I really feel like I am viewing it from both an American set of eyes as well as my experience on the ground in China, helping accelerate clean energy, helping introduce smart grid, helping build first curriculum for mayors across China on eco cities, etc. So balance is the name of the game. And nuance, I think, is also very important when you're looking at China and how it's motivated to move forward, whether it's collaborating or competing. So with that, I want to say, I think one of the interesting points about why China is innovating so fast right now is the motivation is about safety and security. I mean, think about the recent history of poverty, of basically all rural development, and now, now we're able to have everybody, almost everybody fed, right? So safety and security, I think, is the primary motivation. It's not about competition or military dominance. Whereas I think in my birth country, America, it really is about, winning the game. I think China is much more balanced. Two, I think China has a very unique ability to focus. And because its leaders are sort of in place in one seat for about 10 years, it's able to drive that focus in the longer term and not be sort of swayed, this sort of seesaw and this back and forth tug of war between two different people or multiple parties focuses. I think uniquely, it's able to identify what I call acupressure points of change. So for example, when I first started joint US-China collaboration on clean energy, that was really the first push for clean tech in China. It really came out of this conference that I put together called the MIT Forum on the Future of Energy in China, and then just sort of exploded this interest in this new technology. And then very shortly after I finished that conference, the US and China government really pushed me. I mean, they really pushed me to start this nonprofit. I was very happily a venture capitalist at the time. But I dropped my job and I said, okay, this is too big of an issue. I'm going to spend 10 years of my life to help China change its trajectory on climate change. And so the US government actually had me bring in smart grid technologies into China in 2007. At the time, there wasn't even the term smart grid in China. But because China was able to really, really double down, lean in to these things like smart grid, this acupressure change really has multidimensional effect across China and beyond. Two is I think it has this political will that a lot of countries don't have. So the ability to say, we're gonna peak carbon emissions by 2030, they're gonna do it. The ability to say, hey, we're gonna go carbon neutral by 2060. We don't know how to do it, but we're gonna do it by 2060. That is political will that very few countries have. Most importantly, I think China has an ability now to create from the future and not the past. It's not about making China great again. It's about every single city have an urban planning museum that shows the city 20 years from now. What is it going to look like? It's about the China dream. That's actually a project that I started in 2010 to reimagine prosperity for China, and then Xi Jinping somehow picked it up and it became the national slogan of China. But it really is this mentality of not being stuck in the past, not griping about what we lost, but just leaping forward, right? So focus on the future. Two is I think it has this really unique ability to scale. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that China has mandatory government training of 12 days, mandatory training per year if you're part of the government. And I know because I used to train at the National Academy for Mayors of China, the China Executive Leadership Academy Pudong, as a professor at the China Academy of Governance, which recently merged with the party school. And so imagine if China has these new policies that are, just sort of raining down from the sky, they're able to scale this knowledge through mandatory training across the country fairly easily. And I wish every country would be able to do that. The other one is that China uniquely is able to experiment with sustainable technologies at city scale. Now remember, sustainability in anything infrastructure is about very, very large, has to be city scale. It can't be building scale. It cannot be micro. It's about balance, right? It's about ecosystem. China, because it was building cities, right? Like over 1 million people. 1 million people is like really tiny, right? China is actually able to say, okay, we're going to do smart city pilot in Yangzhou, right? In 9 months, I had worked with the deputy mayor there, the head of the economic zone. In 9 months, I was cutting the ribbon for the first smart city of China. Then, all of a sudden you've got 5, 10 cities that are, pilots. Then you've got hundreds of cities that are smart city pilots. So China's really got an edge when it comes to scaling innovation, really key. I also think that this is really important. China is used to change. It's willing to change. It's willing to give up everything it knew, like cash, and within a year, everybody is on digital cash. WeChat Pay, Alipay, like what's cash, right? It does that with policies, it does that with cities, it does that with like every dimension of living in China. And it's willing to tweak, right? It adopts technologies, but it tweaks it, it localizes it really, really quickly. And now what I've seen is that it's really leaning in to R&D, like true R&D. If you can see the nuclear fusion, you can look at green hydrogen, what they're doing there. So I think that combined with billions of dollars of investments in every single technology, what we should be doing is not criticizing China on how many coal plants they, created that moment. They should be looking at momentum. Momentum is so much more important in the longer term than metrics, snapshot metrics. And in fact, what China has is not just linear momentum, it's like tornado momentum, it's angular momentum. Right? And so this is why China has been able to change so quickly. The last one is China has an understanding that industry is about ecosystems. You see this in like one city creates all the buttons in the world, right? And now it's like Hefei, Anhui is like the most amazing nuclear fusion labs, and they're training 1,000 nuclear plasma technologists. They're putting 1.5 billion per year in one city alone just to create nuclear fusion by 2050, commercially scaled nuclear fusion. This is like, Iron Man, the infinite powered cell in his suit, right? It's like Jetsons. So, but they're willing to take a bet and say it's going to be part of our national plan. So the supply chain is much more vertically integrated. So if you're starting a company, then you're going to work with private and SOEs and the government. You're going to be handed customers before you even begin, right? This is really, really important for startups, right? So I would say because of all this, China has, I'm going to call it a Jenga approach to innovation, where it takes out, dematerializes, and then it keeps building on top of that, versus a whack-a-mole approach where other countries are just like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to defend on this. Oh, tariff this, whatever. So Jenga versus whack-a-mole in the long run is going to make China multi-dimensionally more successful in every single technology. And this is not something that I like take pride. I want China only to win. No, China is going to take this and it's going to give a lot of it away. It's going to collaborate internationally with as any country that's willing to. So I think in the long run, China's investments, China's hardships are going to benefit all the world.